Hello, welcome to the Business Science Podcast. I'm Keith Parent, CEO of Court Square Group and RegDocs 365. Before we start a discussion today, a little bit about the companies. For over 30 years, Court Square has been a managed service provider um, dedicated to empowering those who change lives, particularly in the life science space. Our audit-ready, compliant cloud environment provides life science companies with the highest level of data integrity, from preclinical to clinical, all the way through regulatory approval and manufacturing. Our RegDocs 365 platform is a validated content repository for all content for R&D, regulatory submissions, anything that you would want to use data that's going to be included in a submission, or anything that the regulatory authorities want to take a look at. We support many startups as some of the largest international life science companies. Our suite of solutions includes validated hostings, AI solutions, content repositories, integration of many of those. Today, I'm speaking with Bryan Reynolds, the CEO of Docxonomy. And Bryan and I have gone a long way back. I'll let Bryan introduce himself, but our topic today is going to be, how do you develop an AI strategy? And we're going to try to stay very high level today, but I really want to have Bryan talk to us a little bit about how companies would think about developing that AI strategy. So Bryan, would you give us some background?
Sure. Yeah, Keith, thanks a lot. Yeah, it's Keith and I have known each other for quite some time, and it's a pleasure to be on the podcast to talk about this topic. It's something that Keith and I talk about on a pretty regular basis, and it's very exciting, obviously, to me. I've been in this industry working with unstructured data management or content management, if you will, for about 30 years now. And in my background, I've worked on thousands of projects over the life of my career with other teams all over the world. In particular, as Keith said, in the life science industry. So very keen and focused on dealing with the problems that you're facing. And in the last 7 years, we've been focused on the AI side of it. So we moved into this area, developing out the Docxonomy platform and building out an engine that was designed specifically to solve these problems. And I'm looking forward to talking more about that today. And yeah, we'll stay high level, but yeah, looking forward to talking to it, Keith.
That's great. I've been involved with a number of committees in industry groups, particularly DIA. I've done some work with DIA, and we have an AI working group that a number of us from a lot of different companies have met. And I try to go to as many sessions or webinars as I can that talk about AI particularly within the life science, clinical and regulatory, because those are the areas that we focus the most in. But if a company was out there and they're trying to develop an AI strategy, when I go to some of these presentations, I hear the very big companies talk about what they do and how they're doing things and how they pull stuff together. But I deal with a lot of these smaller companies. How do these companies think about AI, and what should they be thinking about from an AI strategy perspective? Can you give us a little bit of background on that and why you think how they should kind of go at it?
Yeah, I think, well, in this day and age, and it's been this way for a while, but it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose, right? With all of the terms and technology and things that are out there today regarding AI, especially since the onset of, the infamous ChatGPT that everybody talks about, right? That there are many others, of course, that have come into play today, but that's by far the one that's spoken about the most in the public domain. And people are wanting to tap into this technology and use it, big and small, right? Big, like you said, big organizations as well, but the small organizations can capitalize and use this technology as well. But the biggest problem that I hear over and over and over again is the fear of putting what would be considered company corporate IP, right? Stuff that is private to the company, that's unique to their brand or what they do or how they build or their process and things like that, their drugs, their compounds, and so forth, right? They don't want to put that stuff into these big giant chat GPTs. LLMs are what they're called, large language models, because they're afraid that that data will be consumed, and rightfully so. I mean, that's how it works. I do know there are agreements and things that you can do to try to minimize that, but at the end of the day, you're putting that information out into a public domain. So I think when it comes to strategy, and this would be both for large corporate organizations as well as smaller companies, is it needs to be brought within, right? So you need to be able to have a solution that you can tap into and utilize that gives you the benefits of accelerated uh, adjustment generating, like zero to first draft, right? That's one that you and I talk about all the time. How can I take this process that I have human beings doing today that takes days or weeks or maybe months, right? Where they're cutting and pasting and reading through documents, and then they're creating a new document, a first draft of a new document, whether it be for submission, whether it be for a trial, whether it be for filling out forms for like 1572 forms, things like that. How can I automate that process using AI so I can take my knowledge workers, the ones that are doing that sort of repetitive work, and move them down and make them more productive and let them focus on where I need the human mind to be involved. And that's where you can take this technology and utilize it to do just that, right? You can scale it, but you need a platform, in my opinion, that allows you to do that without having to understand all the craziness that's out there, the drinking of the fire hose, as I said at the beginning, right? How can I simplify that and just do these steps very quickly and get the results that I need to get without having to completely understand the world of data science and AI and programming and all of that?
Well, and I think that's interesting because, part of my vision as the CEO at Court Square was to look at what we do and we're not an AI company. I can
Right.
readily admit that we don't plan on being an AI company. However, we want to have AI solutions for our clients. So what I've done is I've reached out to a number of different AI companies, of which Docxonomy is one that we work together, and Bryan's been great to work with. In order to take the vision of a solution, you've got to be able to work with somebody who can actually see that and work with a subject matter expert to come up with that. I think one
Right.
of the big problems is I've talked with some different AI companies, and they go off and they do their thing, but they don't understand the end result. And what happens is they come back with some type of solution that has nothing to do with the way somebody's actually going to work. So when we
Right.
talk about doing an AI strategy, how would you think about going about it? Let's say for a mid-sized company that is just new to Chat GPT, they're excited about doing something like that, but they want to be able to figure out how can we bring something in-house? How can we look at those things there? How do I get the ROI from a solution, which I don't know what it's really going to cost me to do?
Right. So I think there's a lot of steps there, right? So let's kind of break that down a little bit, right? So the first step is deciding that, okay, yes, we do want to move forward and utilize this capability, right? We do believe it will bring us benefit. And maybe we don't know how, and we don't know what that next step is yet, and we'll talk about that as we go through this. But the very first step that I think is important for any company is to say, yes, we want to embark upon that journey, right? And we want to take a look at that. So as they make that decision, because that's kind of a big decision, and you will have, in that process, it's important to know, right? You will have pushback. There are a lot of people, there are different kinds of people, right? Different mindsets that everybody has. We're all unique, in individuals as we are as human beings. And so some people are afraid of this. There's a lot of fear. Hey, this is going to take away my job, or, this is going to do this or that. And then there are others that are very much, fully bought into technology and think it should do everything, right? And they're ready to just jump in, head first into the water. And there's people all kind of in the middle. So you do have to have that discussion amongst the leadership, to decide, okay, here's how we're going to go. We'll start small. I do always recommend start small. Don't try to boil the ocean, because that just doesn't work out. So choose a process, right? You have many processes. You'll find that you'll be able to utilize this technology as you go forward and you learn about it into every one of them, but start with just one and look at that process. And then you need to map it out. Whether you do that individually as your own organization, how do we do what we do today? Like, what are the steps? You do need to understand those steps. You need to flow out, what they are, and then start to look at the timing. How much time is it taking? How many people are involved in this? How many iterations are we having to go through? And you need to be real. You need to write that down. You need to document that, and you need to work with the lower level group of people right down in the trenches, right, that are doing the work, and gauge that. That's gonna help you build your ROI, right, later. Once you've Once you've mapped that out and you have a clear understanding about how that process works and how long it takes to do it, and you've documented it in essence, right? Now you can come back and say, okay, well, let's look at the tools, right? Let's see what's available now. Well, how can I fix this? And we mentioned, for example, a lot of times in most of these processes, I'll give you an example of one that's probably a great way to kind of explain it, right? In this case, it was a translation situation. They were sending out for external translations. They were spending a lot of money doing that every year on an annual basis to get these back. It was taking weeks to months to get them back. And then they still had to go out to the regional locations to be reviewed to make sure that it was right. There were still edits, so modifications. So this whole thing was taking a really long time. So we mapped this thing out and we realized that they were spending anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks to do this process, right? And the way they were currently doing it. And then we equated the dollar value associated with all of that, the time and resource associated with it, plus the actual external cost of using an outside vendor in this case. What we were able to do is use AI to bring that in, get to the same result that they were getting to in just a matter of a couple of days, right? We were able to cut, weeks to just a couple of days and have an accurate output by utilizing AI in that process. So once you map that flow out, once you understand how it works, and then you take tools and you apply those tools to this, then you can, accelerate that process and begin to put those in place. Once you have that in place for that one and you run it through and you see the ROI, next thing you know, then you can say, okay, well, how do we repeat that process for the next, process and the next process and so on, right? But that's how you get started. First, agree. How do we get started? Let's do it. Are we going to do it? Let's pick one process. Let's map it out, and then let's start to apply the tools and work through there and get to that ROI and prove it out.
I think that's where one of the things that we've done so well together is just looked at some of the issues that we've had with our customer base and said to them, as I look and see what's going on, I see where inherently in the life science world we seem to add in all these manual steps.
Yes.
We do checks, and whether it's clinical or it's in regulatory, we're working with CROs, we're working with sponsors. We're always putting extra checks in. We're putting these different things that have to happen, and it seems like we've added so much manual effort in these things. I think that's a perfect place to look at putting in AI-based solutions, and that's where I've worked with Bryan on a number of things to say, hey, we've got this issue with this customer. Can we do this? How does this work? So I think it's mapping that out. And I think you need to know your process up front. So if you don't know your process, it's going to be hard to use any kind of AI solution. But even on the AI working groups that I work with, a lot of times we've actually backed off and said it's almost in looking at the remote process automation or intelligent automation as opposed to AI, because it's hard for people to grasp the whole concept of machine learning and all the
Right.
different things that have to go into that with the LLMs and the small
Right.
language models and all the different things. So sometimes it's just saying, how can I take processes that we're working on and smooth those out and make those so they're much quicker? Um,
Right.
in this industry, over the last X number of years, particularly with COVID, there's a lot of people that have gone out of the industry, healthcare in general. Well, there's a
Right.
lot of people that have a lot of tribal knowledge of how to do certain things. A lot of
Hmm.
that knowledge is being lost on people retiring or going out of the industry. By capturing that knowledge within intelligent tools that we put together, we can save that and actually work with a younger workforce that's coming in to take their place
Yep.
to be able to do some of that. So in my mind, I think it's looking at from an AI strategy perspective, how do I take the people that I do have and
Hmm.
get them to be able to do more work with,
Hmm.
the more and the better work that they would actually do as a with their job function, as opposed to having them manipulating documents or manipulating, opening documents, doing things. I think the other thing, Bryan, I think we might have mentioned it a little while ago, was as we're doing this work, we also want to have that human in the loop concept, right? I think
Yes.
it's also, and I think that's where some people in the life science world worry about things. They worry about, I can't just have AI go out and do these stuff. So tell me a little bit about how you think about human in the loop and where you bring those kind of things in for some of the processing that you do.
Yeah, so I totally agree. Human in the loop is something that we must have in place because, these AI models, as wonderful as they are and what they're able to accomplish and do to help us be better at what we do, I believe wholeheartedly that we're still in a state, and I think we will be for some time, regardless of what you hear and read. I mean, I'm pretty deep into this, of what we call coexistence. Okay, we coexist with these models. These models help us be better, right? Help us do more, as you were just saying earlier, right? How can I get more done, right, with either less people, because some people are taking early retirement or retiring or moving out, right? How do I capture that, bring that in? And working with less people, how can I still achieve the same result? And this technology can help us do that, but it's a coexistence. We need the human being to look at it, because a computer is really great at teaching it to do something repetitively, and it will do it better than a human in that one particular task when you teach it, to do that, right? Because it has so much to draw on that a human can't draw on, but it can't reason out and deal with anomalies and things that come up, right? Only the human mind can do that today. And I think it will be that way for some time in the foreseeable future. So the human needs to become part of it, right? Become part of the process. And so the way I see it is, you take these repetitive sort of mundane steps that people are doing today because we needed people to do it, because that was the only way we could do it, because you couldn't write enough logic and enough rules into code to be able to do it efficiently. It was just too much. The models have replaced that part of it, but you need the human to move down to the end of the process and then see the review, right? So it creates and does this very quickly, in seconds in some cases, right? And outputs this, and then the human takes over. And that's like the concept, right? Zero to first draft, right? We go in, we point at a bunch of content, we say, okay, generate this new letter, let's just say, right, from this content that looks like this letter, and create the first draft of that. It does that in just seconds, and then the human then can take over from there and then finish it off and review it, make sure it's right, do those adjustments. I think we'll be in that human in the loop phase for quite some time, and people need to understand that that's a better role, because who wants to be doing cutting and pasting, right? When, they can be doing what their mind is made to do.
It's interesting. You spoke about a little bit earlier that you follow the industry, you look at a lot of things. I've been watching lately a lot of the responses coming back from JP Morgan and talking about companies now thinking that we've hit an inflection point. There's going to be more investment in this and people going after this. I can tell you that a couple of years ago, as part of the AI working group with DIA, I can tell you that we had a number of people in the regulatory space that were on that committee. And quite honestly, most of the people in regulatory said we would never use AI to generate output that we would give to a regulatory authority.
Right.
Almost to a person, you'd hear that day in and day out when we'd have our meetings. And then ChatGPT came along, and all of a sudden people were starting to generate all these different things going out. And then within a year of that coming out, we were talking now that the rhetoric had actually changed, where people were saying, how can I generate these things that I can actually give to the regulatory authorities?
Right.
Can we use these tools to be able to do that? So I think that the mindset is slowly but surely shifting toward
Yes.
being able to do that. So I think that now, particularly in the clinical and in the regulatory space, I see a lot of opportunity for people to, as we're talking about AI strategy, again, look at those things. You had mentioned to me a long time ago the cost of what it takes to get to someplace, and a lot of times that cost is in time. And if we look at the time to get to a point where I can get a drug to get approved, what are
Yeah.
all the steps that we do to take to get into that? And can
Yeah.
I look at those steps that are manual in basis, and can I target those areas? Because if I can cut those down, maybe I can get out to the market faster. Can you talk a
Exactly.
little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah, that's a really great point. I mean, and this is where I think technologies, AI-based technologies really help accelerate. But when you think about the drug development process, right? And anybody can look this up, right, and look at it, but um, it takes anywhere between 7 to 10 years or so, right? In that process from the beginning, right, of wanting to develop or solve a problem for a particular uh, uh, case, right? Whatever it may be, cancers, different cancer types, different diabetes, stuff like that, right? And so from compound and starting to test compounds and all that, going through that whole cycle from your clinical trials and ultimately finally getting to where you have your NDA, right? And you can start to market this drug. It's a long period of time. And in that window, on average, they say you spend about 1.2 or 1.4, something like that, $1 billion, right? Yeah, this is for your blockbuster type drugs. But still, if you look at that window of time, though, everything that happens in there, extremely expensive. And it's very time oriented, right? There's lots of steps, lots of people, lots of hands involved, lots of different documents. I mean, thousands and thousands of processes that are running on, throughout there that all could be enhanced by this. But if you think of it in that way, you're saying, how do I compress that time? Like you said, how do I lessen the amount of time that it takes me in each one of these steps, and I keep compressing, I'm going to shorten the cycle that it takes for me to go from zero to NDA, right? To, and get us to that point. And the sooner I get to that NDA and get it approved, right? The more I can capitalize on the market while I have that exclusivity, on all that investment that I've made in it. And so to me, you're saving money because you're shortening time and you're increasing profitability because you're going to gain more time on the other end. And this is where AI plays, I think, a pivotal role. It helps accelerate and streamline every one of those thousands of processes that are in there. They all can be benefited in some way or some form to technology. But humans need to be involved in that, right? And because you want the human in the loop, right? And so technologies that are out there today, and this is where I think this goes back to what I said at the very beginning, drinking from the fire hose, right? It's overwhelming. I mean, even if you go to ChatGPT and you log in and you get on, right, and you start to write prompts, right? And the first thing is like, how do I write prompts, right? That's become a whole industry of its own, prompt engineering, right? How do I interact with this thing to get value out of it and so forth? And not everybody is going to do that or want to do that or is tuned into being able to do that. So how do you get tools that can streamline that and simplify that and make it easy so that the individual gets the value of the AI and they can choose to use it when they need to use it and not have to understand all of that complexity, right? It just works and know that it's secure. And I think that's the area where we can provide a lot of value in that area. But that's one thing that I think people need to be thinking about, right? How do I streamline that process?
That's great, Brian. I think we're coming to our end of time here, so I just want to any final thoughts before we close out this podcast today? We get a lot of really good information and developing that AI strategy. Some quick thoughts.
Uh, no, I think the main thought is, like I said at the beginning, the first step is decide that you want to do this. Come together and decide that you want to do it, and then get a good partner, that understands it because, there's a lot going on. And I think if you work with a good partner in doing that, that can help guide you and you can work together, you can very rapidly begin to deploy these strategies and begin to gain value.
It's fantastic. For everybody out there, I think that AI is going to be a way of helping us to be far more efficient going forward, utilize our people's time far more efficiently, and actually make them be better workers because they're going to be able to focus on the things they really like to do as opposed to those mundane tasks that they have to do. So with that being said, thank you very much, Brian. It has been a pleasure having you on the podcast today. I'll look forward to
Absolutely.
talking to everybody on our next one. Thank you.
Yep. Take care. Thanks.